Hello, everybody, and welcome to Answers for April 20, 2022. I'm Kevin Daly for PATH. In this edition of Answers, there will be a school update by yours truly. Our information specialist, Audra Talbot, will talk with Kristen Cardona of Wesleyan University. Kristen is the author of Creativity and Learning in Post-Pandemic America. We'll also be joined by Bryan Klimkiewicz, who serves as Bureau Chief at the Bureau of Special Education, who will discuss the new IEP form that will be taking effect after June. As always, there will be time for Q&A toward the end. Just use the Q&A and chat buttons on your screen. Answers is brought to you by PATH, a nonprofit organization that has supported Connecticut families of children with special needs for over 35 years. If you have any questions about this webinar, please contact me directly by email at kdaly@pathct.org. And while you're online, visit our website and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And be sure to check out the PATH channel on YouTube, where you'll find past editions of this webinar. And here's the fine print, folks. This webinar should not be regarded as legal advice or healthcare advice, or advice of any kind. Simply put, this webinar is a search for answers. It is the sole property of PATH and not to be used for any other purpose without permission, although it's okay to share links to our videos. Let's get started with the school report. We want the pandemic to go away, yet the pandemic continues, and so does its effect on public school students, both in Connecticut and across the nation. The children's mental health crisis, the decline in student achievement, the teacher and staff shortages, the challenges of just living the last 2 years. All these factors are putting our children's education at risk. And like many of the negative outcomes of the pandemic, the risk is greater with special education students and students with disabilities, more than it is for their typical peers. Take the student mental health crisis, for example. Some special education students are at greater risk than their typical peers simply due to the nature of their disability. For example, according to the latest data, in Connecticut, more than 5,000 special education students are identified with emotional disturbance. This is about 7% of all special education students. Many of these students went into the pandemic with clinically significant levels of anxiety and depression. It's only logical to expect they would be at greater risk than their typical peers. And what about students with autism? Connecticut has more than 10,000 students who have the autism label. That's about 13% of all special education students. Anxiety is one of the chief components of autism. It's built in at various levels, and it's safe to reason that students with autism would be at greater risk as well. And what about the other special education students, the ones who don't have ED or autism, but who experience mental health issues that result from social tensions in school, or from their performance on tests and exams? These students are at greater risk as well. And as expected, the pandemic did have an effect on those at risk. There's a lot of evidence out there. Here's just one of many studies that illustrate what I mean. In early 2021, a poll by the National Federation of Families surveyed about 1,100 families representing 2,300 children in all 50 states. About 60% of these families had at least one child with an IEP or 504 plan. In their survey, caregivers reported their children were experiencing a 70% increase in behavioral health symptoms that include anxiety and depression. The caregivers were experiencing a surge in their own behavioral health difficulties too. And the surge is still with us today. But of course, there is a lot more to poor mental health than just feeling blue. As the CD states in its publication, Adolescent and School Health, mental health disorders affect student achievement, the choices students make, and sometimes it's lifelong choices, and their ability to form meaningful relationships. It comes with an increased risk of drug use, violence, and other unhealthy behaviors. In response to the crisis in children's mental health, our legislators on Capitol Hill and Hartford are considering several bills that would further our ability to cope with the crisis. Two of the more notable bills were reported recently by the Hartford Courant, Senate Bill 2 and House Bill 5001. Senate Bill 2 has provisions that expand access to mental health and support for young people and provide training on mental health screening and intervention for local boards of education. House Bill 5001 has provisions that include funding for in-school mental health clinics and creating peer support programs in schools. Both bills are currently in committee, as they say, and there are many other proposals coming out of Capitol Hill and Hartford. The fact these bills exist is a sign that some people are taking this crisis seriously. And then there is the Killingly Board of Education. As reported by the Hartford Courant on April 13th, the State Department of Education is investigating the Killingly Board of Education in response to a complaint that was filed by town residents. Why did they complain? Because the Killingly School Board rejected a plan that would have created a school-based mental health center at Killingly High School at no cost to the school district. Killingly High School is the town's one and only public high school. It has about 800 students. Compared to high schools in Connecticut's larger cities like New Britain High School, which has more than 2,000 students, Killingly High School is relatively small. It's important to note the investigation is still in progress. There are no conclusions yet. The complaint claims that the Killingly Board failed to meet social and emotional health standards that are set by the state, and the complaint cites a recent survey of Killingly students that shows a great need for mental health services for young people there. The complaint also cites data from Killingly High School itself that shows that during the first half of the school year, there were 500 incidents in this school of 800 students where students had to leave class and seek counseling from school staff due to their emotional condition. The chair of the Killingly School Board has since resigned, and the investigation continues. The situation in Killingly raises an important question. Are schools prepared to handle this crisis in student mental health? In public schools, when it comes to student mental health, it's the school psychologists and school counselors who are at the forefront. They have the training in mental health disorders, and they know how to respond when students are in crisis. Many school psychologists are certified by the National Association of School Psychologists, or NASP. NASP recommends a ratio of 1 psychologist for every 500 students. School counselors are represented by a national organization too, in this case, the American School Counselor Association. The ASCA recommends a ratio of 1 school counselor per 250 students. Now, I'm bringing this all up because a recent analysis of federal data by Education Week has determined that most school districts are far below the recommended levels for both professions. How many schools meet the recommended ratios? Well, in its analysis of federal data, Education Week looked at the percentage of students who attend school in districts that met the recommended ratio of school psychologists to students. That's 500 to 1, and the results are in. Currently, no states meet the recommended ratio. Only the tiny District of Columbia and its 115 schools have met the recommended number. Only the schools in Maine and North Carolina have more than half of the recommended number of school psychologists, Maine with 79%, and North Carolina with 50%. This makes Maine and North Carolina the top 2 states in the nation. Where does Connecticut fit in? Connecticut is the number 3 state for meeting this ratio, with 43% of our students attending schools in districts with the recommended number of school psychologists. These states have less than 5%. These states reported 0%. The remaining states range from 5% to 27%. Now let's consider the ratio recommended by the American School Counselor Association, which is 250 to 1. Currently, no states meet the recommended ratio of school counselors to students. Only in New Hampshire and Vermont do more than half of the students have adequate access to school counselors, 72% and 69% respectively. And after the first 2, there is a big drop-off, with Colorado next at 37%. The states in this group range from 5% to 22%. Connecticut is one of those states with only 7% of our students attending schools in districts with enough school counselors to meet the recommended ratio. In these states, it's 5% or less. And these states report less than 1%. Illinois and Utah did not provide data. So are America's public schools prepared to handle the crisis in student mental health? These figures from Education Week certainly don't look encouraging, although there is more to the solution than hiring more school psychologists and counselors. And if America's schools aren't prepared to handle the crisis, will the legislators and policymakers and the taxpayers they work for give our schools the support they need to get the job done? That's a question with an answer that falls into a category that pops up now and again on this webinar. There are things we know, and there are things we don't know, but we will find out. Coming up is Bryan Klimkiewicz, Bureau Chief, and be sure to join us on the next edition of Answers on May 18th. But first, a conversation with Audra Talbot and Kristen Cardona, who is the author of Creativity and Learning in Post-Pandemic America. It offers ways schools can close the gap in learning the pandemic caused by fostering a creative atmosphere in classrooms. Let's listen in on their conversation.
Thank you for joining us tonight for Answers. My name is Audra Talbot, and tonight I'll be introducing to you and interviewing Kristen Cardona, who wrote a spectacular paper called Creativity in K-8 Learning in Post-Pandemic America. So Kristen, first of all, thank you for joining me tonight. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I just want to launch right into it because I think this is your subject matter expertise. So I've been very excited, actually, almost for a year, to interview you for this. So thank you again for joining me. I guess my first question is, what is creativity?
I think when people think of creativity in society, they think of something grandiose, like painted, ceilings and famous buildings or amazing inventions. But creativity is really taking in information and then analyzing it and producing something novel and unique to yourself. And so when you think about it, we're surrounded by everyday creativity. When we come up with a new way to jerry-rig a remote control that doesn't normally work, when a child writes their first sentence, invents their first comic book story, as long as it's new to the person, it's new and unique to the person, that's an act of creativity.
Wow. I actually never thought about that. So thank you for explaining that. It's new to the person, and that's an act of creativity. I like how you put that. What's the relationship, if you will, between creativity and learning?
I think creativity and learning have an intrinsic relationship. If you think about cooking, some of us prefer to cook with recipes, and some of us prefer to invent as we go. And it's sort of the approach of an artist or a scientist. And so people that like to follow recipes are very good in the American school system we currently have, because we're raising people to be rule followers to a degree, to be able to follow detail, follow sequence. And that's an important skill to have. If you don't have those foundations down, you can't be a cook. But the thing that we don't teach as much in school or value as much is when people are creative, when they look at the items that they do have available to them in the kitchen, like when you don't have something for dinner at night, and look at what you do have and how can I combine this and how can I turn this into a meal? And that really is a valuable skill for everyone to have, but I think even more so looking forward into the future, because technology is rapidly changing, our world is rapidly changing, and there's people are going to school and studying degrees, and then, computer science, things are becoming outdated very quickly in our information society. And so I think it's important that we raise our young students to be able to respond to a rapidly changing world by being able to look at a situation, analyze the information, and then create something that fits the current situation, which is more of an act of art than science in one way of thinking.
Yeah, you wrote that encouraging creative thought in students will give their education a boost at a time when they need it the most. That's it's a brilliant comment.
Well, I'm really concerned about American education. I was a classroom teacher for over 15 years. I taught during 9/11, and I watched the impact that had on children, watching them try to process and understand that. I taught during the Newtown shootings, and now I'm in a different position, working for Wesleyan University. And so when COVID happened, I wasn't under the pressure of the classroom teacher, just responding like a first responder. And I was able to really sit back, talk to lots of teachers, lots of parents, lots of students, read lots of articles. And it's obvious that this is going to have a detrimental impact. Perhaps we've never seen such an impact. Even going back to the polio epidemic, we don't have statistics to really know if that's comparable, but all of us know from talking to our neighbors and our family members that there's no family that really hasn't been impacted some way. We know that the delivery of the curriculum has been interrupted to our students. We know parents aren't teachers as well-intentioned as they need to be, and teachers aren't special ed teachers. And so things haven't been delivered as they traditionally would have been. And then you add in the social changes. There's been social isolation. There's been all the adults have been under emotional stress, and that trickles down. So a child that normally had normal curriculum, normal social emotional support, families normally had more food and housing stability, all of this, you go all the way back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We've all been on shaky grounds, and the entire institution has been on shaky grounds. So we know this generation is going to need support unlike any other. And the reason why I'm such a big proponent for creativity is because when you look at what the theorists have to say, there's some theorists that are educational theorists, and they really study education and intelligence. And there's many leading ones, but a very famous one out of Yale is Sternberg. And his most recent theory of intelligence is a combination of analytical ability, what we sort of think of as traditional IQ intelligence, creative intelligence, and practical ability, which is almost the ability to weave the two of them together. And so when you look at the field of educational psychologists, they say creativity is really important for raising the level of analysis and thought and outcome. And then when you look at positive psychologists, which look at students' strengths and emotions, and they're really focused on well-being. And that started back, Maslow wasn't exactly a positive psychologist because the field wasn't, developed at that time, but it grows out of that concept. And it's still valid to today. And now Martin Seligman is one of the leading researchers, and he's been doing work with University of Pennsylvania, with school systems, looking at developing students' strengths and different ways that if we create a positive social emotional learning environment for children, they academically thrive. And so it seems like no matter which way you want to come at this, as the educationalist or as the psychologist, they both agree that psychology has better outcomes in both fields. And so I feel like for our students, if they don't have both needs, I would be surprised. But either way, all students would benefit.
Okay, so my next question for you, how can creativity be used as a teaching strategy?
Well, I think when you spoke earlier about how you were working with your own students, I think, or your own children, exploratory learning is the way that it occurs. And it would be great if we could revise the whole American school system and change the focus and get more into the learning process and focus less on outcomes. But I think the reality is institutions are slow to change, and teachers are also very burdened, and they're working under other laws and curriculums that they have to meet certain requirements. So I think that we can support our teachers as much as possible to say, you know, I encourage this. I'm interested in collaborative learning in my classroom. I would love more project-based research, and defending them and helping them win their case, get extra funding from PTOs. But I also think in our own homes, we create more opportunities where we model this for our children and we let them explore their interests. So a big focus is letting children explore their interests and build on their strengths. And really, parents know their children's interests and strengths better than anyone else. And so to give your children opportunities, if a child wants to go on vacation to Pennsylvania for no real good reason, to support them, to help them to find out, you know, this is what we need to do. We need to plan a trip. Where will we go? And there's a lot of teachable things in that. How long will it take to get to A to B? When are they open? How much will it cost? To just encourage children to pursue their passions.
Yeah, that was beautifully said.
And I guess one last thought is, and I feel like this probably comes to you naturally, but it doesn't come to everyone, to encourage risk-taking, because not everything turns out beautifully. And our children never want to let any of us down. And so if they feel we're going to be disappointed, they're not going to try. And so I think it's always great as adults to model to children when we have tried and failed, because children in general, internalized failure is a really bad thing. And I think it's very important to show how often we all fail in life and how it builds resilience and how it helps us get to our goals.
Creative qualities in people. What are the creative qualities in people?
The creative people are normally open. They're very open-minded. They're willing to sort of consider everything. And in that way, they have more information to play with. Often they have a good imagination, or they visualize things differently. They spend a little more time in La La Land. So you can see the things that you're sort of yelled at for in elementary school can actually be an asset. They tend to be flexible, willing to pursue different avenues. And usually they have good logical thinking skills, but then they also have this spice of creativity or humor. They approach things in a unique way. And I have a little example. I have a husband who's an identified special ed student. And when I met him, I don't know what we were talking about, but it was something like a list of items. And it was an orange, a baseball, a basketball, a pumpkin, an egg, and a ping pong ball. And so I heard that list and I was like, well, obviously in my brain, that was food and sports. And whatever he said to me next, he had categorized them as white and orange.
Yeah.
And
I just did.
Right. It is this moment where this person thinks different than me. And this is so amazing. And our partnership can be so amazing because we're bringing such different concepts to the table. And I think in the school systems, a lot of times there's a correct answer. You have to get the correct answer, and it's important that we go through the process and see the value in multiple ways to arrive at the same answer and arriving at multiple answers.
Can teachers develop creative qualities in their students?
I think that they can. I mean, I think we all can, because we nurture what we want nurtured. And you can see that in magnet schools. If you send a child to a fitness magnet school, a science magnet school, we develop the qualities that we want to see. I think that a creative environment is process focused, which is interesting. If you look at the art standards for the state of Connecticut, it really focuses on the art process, the process of making art. And in that way, it makes sense because we all know art is creative, but that to take that same value and what is the process of writing your written prompt for the day? What is the process of doing your science experiment? To shift our educational focus on the outcomes and more on the learning process. And also, it's seen that collaboration enhances creativity, which we sort of have that saying, right? Like more heads are better than one head. Groups, it comes out better in a group. But I think that's hard to grade and hard to defend grades in a school. And so teachers are hesitant to do that, but it's hard to assign a group grade. And there's a lot of complaining around that. And if a way could be found that people would see the value of students working collaboratively, there's a lot to be learned, not only from the sharing of multiple thoughts and perspectives, but they have the opportunity to teach each other, to take on leadership positions, to work out and negotiate differences. And so I understand the litigious world that we live in and why teachers are hesitant to do that, and it is less accessible to us, but it's important. And if it can't be done at this point in the schools, I think it's important to get children into clubs and other activities where they can collaboratively work with their peers toward a common goal.
Excellent. The traditional learning practices, such as rote learning and memorization, why are there enough to prepare students for their future careers?
I think it's because we don't know what our future career is going to be. In that we used to, the schools were set up during the industrial age. And in the industrial age, we knew most people were going to work on assembly lines. There was this concept of making our world homogenous, that we had immigrants coming in and we wanted to get everyone on the same page. So we wanted them to be obedient and disciplined and able to work under those conditions. But now that we live in the information age, and so much can be automated by artificial intelligence, the true thing that makes humans stand out is our ability to be creative, our ability to come up with novel solutions. And I think that's why it's so important to teach students through exploratory learning, because there is a point, and many of us have probably hit this point as adults during the pandemic, that there has not been a guidebook for certain things we have had to learn to adjust our lives or our career. And so we've had to really be resilient and look around and teach ourselves and find resources and learn how to do our jobs in new ways. And I think that is the way the future is moving. And so we best serve our students by teaching them really how to be independent learners.
So you wrote that teachers should ask yes/no questions when instructing their students, but students should be encouraged to ask their teachers yes/no questions. Why is that?
Because we want the students to learn how to identify relevant information, collect it, and synthesize it. When a student is just asked, is this true, yes or no, multiple choice, they're really not analyzing the information and they're not identifying what the key or important points are. It's just being fed to them passively. But when you turn even a lecture environment more into a question and answer, it evolves organically. And because the student is directing where it's headed, not only are they more engaged because they're obviously asking about things relevant to them that they're interested in, but they're beginning to string that information together and create their own mental framework of this is important, this is a supporting detail, this is another piece of information I need to go further with to test if the hypothesis in my head is correct.
So are there any resources you could recommend for teachers and parents that want to encourage creative thinking in their students?
That is a tough one because from my research, there is not a lot of solid or good programs. So I would say I would be hesitant.
Well, your paper.
You could read my paper. I would say be hesitant on signing up. There are programs for sale out there, but I've reviewed the research and they're not too promising. I think the best thing that can be done, there's one article that I will, drop this in the links that I reviewed in my thesis. And it's about a theater program that partnered with a school in England. And I just think it's a very concrete, short example. It's not a very long paper. It's not going to touch on everything we've talked about here, but it was special education identified and non-identified learners that needed extra help. And so removed for the classroom for either if they were academically behind or they were speech delayed or social emotional, just a bonus program. And it was run with a theater program in England. And it ended up having these remarkable results where the children improve across the board in every category. Like they weren't even teaching them academics and their academic scores got better across the board. Their speech fluency got better. Everything improves. And I'll include that for you guys to put in the links. I think that's a very interesting piece of research that shows how important these programs are. But it also didn't come from the school. They worked in collaboration with the school. The children attended on school time, but it didn't really interface with the school. And so I think the important thing is to find what your child is interested in and then give them opportunities to go off with someone who is an expert in that area and explore. And then the only other thing I would say is model the behavior in yourself and model risk taking and talk out loud. You know, when you're stuck in a situation and you don't know how to solve it, talk out your thought process and model it for the children.
Is there anything else that you would like to add? And if not, then, you know, we'll end our interview.
I very much appreciate you having me here today.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And, you know, I look forward to maybe in the future, any more work that you're going to put out there into the world. I would love to read about it. And, you know, I just wanted to add too, there are theater programs here in Connecticut, and it's not specifically for children with you know, in special education or with exceptionalities. It's for both groups. And there's a circus in Middletown, I think, too, that is very productive and very creative. And it just got back in person. So, it, you know, there's a lot out there. You just have to look for it or, you know, tap into your resources. And I just want to put that out there for the families. So that's it for us tonight. I'm sorry.
One last thought, because now you spurred a thought of mine. Because people so often just think of the arts as creative, but there is creativity in science and in lots of programming, and even in the sports. There's a theorist, Csikszentmihalyi, who's a very long, confusing to spell name, but he talks about flow and that flow process of when you're in the zone and how that's actually an act of creativity. So we may not think of a child that wants to sit in the backyard and hit baseballs all day as being creative, but they may actually be having creative experiences in their brain. And so I think it's important to remember to value whatever their interest is, just let them pursue it and give them the support to know failure happens and you're just one step closer to whatever you're about to discover.
So thank you everyone for joining us tonight for Answers. I'm Audra Talbot, and I had Kristen Cardona gracefully report out for us on her paper and answer all of my interview questions. So thank you again, Kristen. It was nice to meet you virtually. I hope someday to meet you in person.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you. Thank you. Back to you, Kevin.
Thanks so much, Audra. Coming up, Bryan Klimkiewicz, who is Bureau Chief at the Bureau of Special Education at the Connecticut State Department of Education.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Welcome back, Bryan. You've been with us before, and it's good to have you here again.
It's great to be here, and I'm excited to talk about an amazing and exciting initiative for our newly designed and our implementation of the individual education program, the new IEP in the state of Connecticut.
I understand that it's more than just a new form that's going to be used. It's an entire system. So, Bryan, I would like to give you the floor. Please tell us about it.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I do have it wouldn't be a presentation without a slide deck, right? So I do have some slides prepared for you this evening for our participants who are joining us live or viewing this session as a recording a little bit later. I'm very anxious to go through this information so that I can hear from the participants and answer any questions that they may have. First, before I begin, I would just like to thank the parents and the educators for their Herculean efforts over the past couple of school years. I can't believe we're already in April and coming near the end of this school year. It's been a journey for sure, a journey that we've all experienced together. And I just have to thank everyone out there for the efforts to support students with disabilities across our state. And I know it hasn't been easy, but those efforts will certainly pay off. And on behalf of the State Department of Education, we are continue to be committed to ensuring that students' outcomes are successful, and we improve the outcomes, both educational and post-secondary education, for all of our students across the state. So I do have only a few short slides to go through, but this initiative really began 5 years ago when I first came to the State Department of Education. I held 18 regional sessions for to hear from parents and educators about the state of special education in our state. We had a focus group that was supported by our RESC Alliance, and we held sessions in English and Spanish. And one of the areas that we looked for feedback on was our current IEP. And I'm very proud of the outcome of the revision of the IEP document. We looked at all, we reviewed our partners across the country and took a look at their IEPs. And Connecticut has a very good IEP currently, but we knew of sort of the areas of concern. It's a little congested and crowded, the landscape versus the portrait setup of the IEP was challenging. As new data points were required over the years, it just kind of packed in and again, crowded information in the IEP. Another area that was of concern was that our present levels of performance, how that student is performing in math and reading and functional behavior and all of the different areas of education, was disconnected in the sense of our annual goals and objectives. So page 4 and 5 of the present levels, flip through to page 7 where goals and objectives are. So the flow of the document needed work, and we had a lot of agreement and collaboration, no matter which stakeholders were providing input. So our new document our goal was to develop a document that was easier to understand for parents and students and easier for our practitioners to utilize in schools to support our students. We did achieve that. I'm proud of that work. As Kevin mentioned, that really was the driving force for our partnership with PCG and a system that's called CTSED, so the Connecticut Special Education Data System. Kevin mentioned it's not only IEPs that the system will support, but you can see the benefits here in this slide deck. I'm happy to share this, Kevin, so I won't go through and read each of these. Just a few things to point out is that we currently have a data collection system with our school districts called CDAC. That stands for Special Education and Data Collection System. So that system will be obsolete once CTSEDS is in place. So we are going to be reducing the reporting burden from districts that they currently have. It'll reduce paperwork and data reporting once we have the system up and running. So that's a really nice addition and a nice benefit of the system, if you will. Another thing that I'd like to highlight here, since I know the SEPTOs do such a wonderful job supporting parents, is that all of the documents that are generated within the system will be translated into the top 10 languages in the state. This will tremendously improve parents and family members' ability to be meaningfully contributing to the processes that are involved for both special education and Section 504. That's a very, no longer will school districts, have to contact or contract with translation companies and causing a delay in getting these documents to parents. And not only the templates will be translated, but also the content of the IEPs and Section 504 plans that are written for our students. So we're really excited. There will be one statewide system. All of our districts will use this system as of 7/1, so just a few short months away. As students transition from one school district to the next, or even from out of state, we'll all be using the same system. So that'll tremendously improve the time that records are shared, and that the implementation of those plans can take place for our students. So this slide demonstrates all of the variety of components that the system will contain. It's really awesome when you think about it, but we know this is a challenge and a change for our parents and our educators. So we need to proceed with caution. We've built in several supports along the lines of training and technical assistance. I have to thank our colleagues at CERC and the RESC Alliance, as well as CPAC, which is our Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center, that is tapped with the notation of being Connecticut's PTI, which is our Parent Training and Information Center. We could not do this work alone, so we have been working alongside our partners to ensure they're trained and knowledgeable, and that they can turn around and provide support to our educators and parents. So the section there that you see that isn't highlighted, the gifted and talented, and the MTSS, which stands for multi-tiered systems of support module, and our early childhood outcomes. Those systems will be in place a little bit after our launch. Everything that's highlighted in yellow will be ready for our launch, and we're excited to provide that improvement. I did mention the parent portal. That parent portal is a really nice feature in the system. As plans and documents are being finalized, they can be shared with the parents right in the system. If there are consent documents, either for evaluation or for the provision of special education, that require signatures for our parents and guardians, those documents too can be signed electronically, all right within the system. This slide just demonstrates a very high-level timeline. We began building the system even prior to the pandemic. We, throughout those challenges in the last couple of years, we've been continuing to prepare this system. When you think about a change as monumental as this, people often ask why now, why during the pandemic? And we absolutely understand the challenges and the burdens and the impact. We know that school districts are facing shortages of staffing. We know that school districts are facing the ever-changing requirements around mitigation strategies and keeping our students and families and educators safe. We know the stressors that have been in place. But any effort to improve outcomes for students with disabilities is an effort and a journey worth taking. And as I said, we started this journey 5 years ago, even before the pandemic, with the launch of July 1, 2022. And all of our efforts have been supporting parents and educators to feel prepared for that transition. So next year will be a transition year, but that switch will be live on July 1, 2022. And we're excited to have that new template in place. And just to bring back Kevin's point again, the system was designed to support process, not just a filling out a form or a template. It really helps planning and placement teams through the process involved with designing and developing high quality IEPs. So having said that, we do have and did engage in a pilot of this system this year. It was not a full pilot, meaning that the data that was utilized in the pilot was false data, if you will. They were scenarios and case studies to bring students from general ed all the way through identification and development of plans. We had 20 districts participate. Currently, we have an additional 20 districts participating in the Section 504 pilot. Feedback from the districts have been incorporated, and our system is being prepped so that it can be as effective and efficient as possible for launch on July 1. I have included our website here that provides resources and training information and up-to-date resources for educators and parents so that you can click on that and explore. If we do have time, I'm happy to walk you through that as well. I did mention the pilot districts. If you're interested, here's a list of the districts that engaged in the IEP pilot training. The next couple of slides are related to our technical assistance training, and there are really two main components of training, and these are 5-year plans. We know that each and every individual can't possibly be trained before the launch of the new system. This IEP quality training is really, Connecticut is a shining light in this area. I'm so proud of the work around IEP quality. We partnered with AIR, a vendor that is nationally known and a special education support for many states, under the leadership of our team in the Bureau of Special Education, and again, with collaboration with our RESC and CERC individuals as well as CPAC, we developed a series of trainings that cover all areas of the special education process. It's a combination of live and recorded sessions. And there is a parent module, which is what I wanted to bring to your attention today. And a direct link will take you to that module. It's available in both English and Spanish. And what that does is take a parent through birth all the way through exiting special education for those that are identified, and whether a student graduates with a regular high school diploma or reaches the maximum age of eligibility, which in Connecticut is the age of 22. So this is a visual for the different areas of the training. And you can see, as I said, it's very comprehensive. Our pilot districts went through this training, provided us feedback. We've tweaked and improved it. These trainings are now happening regionally and are sold out across the books all the way through the end of the school year. And these training sessions will be provided to districts over the next 5 years. They are not required before the launch of CT SEDS, but they provide a nice foundation and support so that the basic concepts are adhered to. This slide is just a visual of what you'll see if you click on that direct link to the parent module, and you can choose and select either an English or Spanish version of that. That was one piece of training that we have rolled out. The other is called CT SEDS user training. So each district was identified with a number of expert trainers that will be user support, if you will, across the state. So roughly 2 individuals per school building have been tapped on the shoulder to become expert trainers. This training will happen over the summer months in preparation for the 22-23 school year. Those individuals will have access to many resources, both recorded and written, to help teachers and related service providers and school-based individuals in how to access this information. Our partners at PCG also have many resources for parents. Our CPAC has already begun training in the new IEP and the nuanced difference between the current IEP and the new IEP. And we also have, for example, one-pagers on how to access the parent portal and how to access the system once it is live and once our schools are using it for development of plans for our students. So Kevin, at this point, I can pause with the slide deck. I do or can share a few additional resources if there are no questions now, but I would like to pause at this point and see if anyone would like me to dive in a little bit deeper to any of the information that I shared.
Brian, I'm looking at the Q&A and chat, and I don't see anything there. So perhaps the thing to do would be to continue.
Thank you very much. And please don't hesitate to stop me as I share and go through a couple of other resources. I would like to share the IEP website with you all at this point in time. And hopefully, Kevin, could you just let me know if that's coming through okay?
It is coming through.
Great. So the link that I mentioned in that slide deck will take you directly to our IEP CT SEDS site. This is the information around IEP quality training. We have some FAQ documents, and the new IEP template is here as well. So this is the resource that I'll show you in just a moment. It's a side-by-side comparison with visual graphics of the current IEP and the new IEP. These are also maybe of particular interest to you. They're called IEP preview sessions. We hold them every Monday, and they're short recorded videos of a presentation of different components of the new IEP and the new process of, for example, generating PPT notices. There is slide decks here. And what this does is show a preview of the system that our educators will be using. And we have these scheduled out through the end of the school year. Essentially, as we hold these sessions, the resources are posted on the site. So I did want to point this out to you to check in on. And again, there are several important resources here that can be accessed at your leisure. Know how busy you all are. And of course, we'll be presenting information to you through the schools as well as your children or young adults receive new IEPs. One thing I want to mention, Kevin, and a question that we get a lot is when would my student have a new IEP, or will the old IEP still be valid as of July 1? The answer is absolutely yes. So the student will not have or may not have a new IEP in CT SEDS until next June. So June 2023. If their annual is this June and a student doesn't have a meeting for another year, that will be the first time that student would have that and access that new IEP. Others may have a new IEP as early as this summer for our 3-year-olds that are turning 3 and eligible for special education. After July 1, that IEP will be developed in CT SED. So we'll have the whole span, and we are not asking districts to take the current IEP and translate it into the new form. It is a clerical task that is not something that we are recommending. We want our educators to become familiar with and trained in the system, but that's not the way to do it. So that does not preclude our teachers, again, from going into the system and being trained in it. So it's a slow rollout, if you will, and those current IEPs that your children and young adults have are absolutely valid, will be implemented, and will be phased in. We have a contract with the current IEP vendors to extract static documents, PDFs, and Word documents that are archived in those systems, and those will be uploaded into the new system so that our educators and teachers can access those and refer back to them all on one system. The next thing that I'd like to share, and Kevin, just let me know if that changed so that now you see the IEP side-by-side document.
Yes, I see it.
Great. So this is another resource that is located, the link is located on our website, and it's just as it says, a side-by-side. On the left side here is our current IEP, and the right side is the new, with just some real high level changes between the two documents. The flow, one of the things that I mentioned earlier on is the flow of the document is improved. But this is a really nice feature here. If your student has an amendment that happens, meaning that the IEP changes without a PPT meeting upon agreement between the parent and the school district, that's documented right in the first section of the IEP. That's another change, is we no longer refer to pages, but to sections of the new IEP. And it will articulate which section of the IEP was revised and a brief overview of what the changes were. This will help parents understand, even though they may have agreed, a few days prior or the week before, what exactly changed in the amendment. The system will, once the user goes in and identifies the section to be changed in the revision, that will be highlighted right in that first upfront for the document for the parent. And I won't go through each of these, Kevin, just on account of time, but I did want to make sure that folks were aware of this. We have this in English as well as Spanish, and it's a very helpful document to see, what is the difference between the current and the new. So I will stop sharing again and then see if there are any questions. If not, I would like to say, if folks do have questions after this session or after viewing this session, please don't hesitate to contact us at the Bureau of Special Education. I do have my contact information in the slide deck, and I'll
And we seem to,
with information and the supports that we've provided. So
Yeah,
let us know.
I mean, it's obvious to me that there is a sensitivity that's being put out there. So I just, on behalf of, me as a parent, so thank you for that. And I like how you said it's a journey. It's a slow rollout, and it's a journey. Yes. It's something we all have to do. And it's, it's hard to accept change sometimes too.
No question about it. That's the most challenging part, is the adults learning the new system and doing something different. And it's interesting because there are no new requirements for IDEA. In the state, we had recent legislation that expanded the age of transition. That was the most recent change we've experienced, but it's the same concepts. It's the same ideas of present levels and goals and objectives. It's just in a different flow and a different format and a way to capture that information. But as you mentioned, it's a slow rollout. Some parents, this will be their only experience in special education. For our youngest families coming in, they won't know the old form. And the parents that have students that are graduating or aging out may not see the new form until that student only in their last annual review. So that'll be a big change. And then you have everyone in between, depending on how many years their student's been supported with an IEP. So we know that different families will need a different level of support, that it's not a broad brush of one fits all.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it was very thoughtful that so much went into the parent perspective of the trainings, and like that you're so available to parents, and then also I think, as a SEPTO representative myself, it's a great responsibility on our part too, to help the families get the word out. Because I just had a conversation today, someone didn't know there was a new IEP coming.
Yeah.
Right. So that's our responsibility, I think, as SEPTOs, as SEPTAs, and parent organizations, to get the word out even more than what we're doing. Because I feel like we're not reaching as many families, obviously, as, I found out today.
Yeah, and our districts are really starting to roll out the communications broadly as well, as we kind of close in to help prepare. But I really believe that once a parent receives the IEP, that may be their first introduction to it. Like, why does this look different?
What is this?
So what happened? And then, so we expect and are prepared in September as parents start to receive the documents to really ramp up the support so that we feel like they'll understand it because it was designed to be easier to read and easier to understand. But there may be a lot of questions. So especially CPAC and some of our other parent entities, ASEPTOs, like you mentioned, we want to be on our toes early in the school year once they receive. Is my audio out?
I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you, Kevin. I don't think Audra couldn't hear me. I don't think.
No, I couldn't hear you, but it said the meeting was
better
muted. Now. Yeah. Okay. Thumbs up. Sorry, Bryan.
That's okay. I was just saying we need to be on our toes in September to help support technical assistance once parents start receiving the new documents.
Yeah, I think that's obvious. Yeah, I agree.
And it's so different. The time to start with that instruction is now. So I'm really grateful that you could join us, Bryan, for this very informative presentation.
Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Q&A and chat, and I don't see anything. Audra, did you have any questions for Bryan?
No, I mean, I'm pretty familiar with the format, and I was just saying to Bryan, like I really like how they're rolling everything out, and I like the slow rollout, and then also how they're taking into consideration about the parent perspective of things, because that's kind of my forte. So yeah, so Bryan, it's obvious to me that you and the department have put a lot of work into this, so that's appreciated, at least in my part.
We have an amazing but small but mighty team at the state that has been outstanding. And it's not only the Bureau of Special Education, it's our performance office, especially our IT department. There's been so much work behind the scenes, and we have an amazing core group that really have been every day focused on this, in addition to all the other activities that we do. So I have an amazing team to thank for this. You do. Kudos. I think that's it for me, Kevin. I don't have any other questions.
All right.
I just wanted to thank Kristen Cardona. I know she's not on with us tonight, but that was her topic was so interesting, and so I maybe in the summer when it's not so busy for me, I'll do a little bit deeper dive into that, because I think there's something there for sure. I have a whole new perspective on creativity. That was pretty cool to hear. Yeah. Yep. But thank you. Thank you for having me tonight. And I have no other questions.
Okay, Bryan, thank you for joining us. Hope you can come back and see us again sometime soon. Of course. Thanks for the invitation. Be well. And Audra, thank you, as always. Please join us on May 18th for the next edition of Answers as the journey continues. Bye.